All right. Good afternoon. August 12th, 2020. The EJLR, the Economic Justice Law Review, Weekly Scholarship Digest. I'm your host, DreSmith, SmittyBanton. You know me, 14 years, Florida International University, Penn State, Widener, and Howard. Right? Taxation is my specialty. However, of course, I've developed a framework for converting all scholarship relating to race and economics, or I'm sorry, all scholarship dealing with racial subordination into an economic construct that I call racially asymmetric market failures and imperfections. So any scholarship that's out there dealing with racial subordination, we can describe how it will maintain or exacerbate the racial wealth gap by determining the extent to which it will exacerbate or maintain racially asymmetric market competition, racially asymmetric market information, and then racially asymmetrically distributed transaction costs and society externalities. Those are along with racially asymmetric profit maximization. In other words, a free market, the one that you hear about by so-called free market fundamentalists. The free market, if there was one to exist, it would require that everyone is a profit maximizer, that everyone would be able to enter or exit any market they chose, that there would be perfect information, that there's no taxes or transaction costs, and we know that market doesn't exist. Right? So instead of a free market eliminating racism, we flip it and show how racism by itself denigrates or destroys any claim to a free market or meritocracy at all, and that we have a market that will perpetuate racism without intervention instead of one, as Gary Becker described, that would eliminate them because of the freeness or the fairness of the marketplace. So that's our framework. Again, racially asymmetric market failures and imperfections. Being racially asymmetric profit maximization. And that can include, on the one hand, the fact that Black folks are more altruistic, that give to charity, a greater percentage of their wealth or income to charity. On the other hand, racially asymmetric profit maximization represents economic withdrawal. It represents all of the microaggressions that drive Black people crazy and away from engaging in the marketplace in a rational manner. We mentioned that a second pillar of a free market is perfect competition. We know that because of capital gaps, there clearly is not, everyone does not have the ability to enter any market they chose. And we know that that is racially asymmetric. And when we can talk about the market for employment. We can talk about the market as consumers. We can talk about the market as entrepreneurship. So this particular category has lots of iterations. We can even talk about the market for law and regulation. We can talk about the market for politics. We can talk about the market, the free market for ideas, right? In any way you choose, we can describe this, how the market is asymmetrical with respect to race, and how that's not just a current indignity, but also will perpetuate the racial market. Oh, I don't like that glare behind me. Let me move a little bit to the side here, see if we can cut that off. Pardon me, guys. All right. So toward that end, I'm sorry, racial. What else we have? Racially asymmetric, racially asymmetric market information. Right? Instead of information being perfectly available, we know it's imperfect and it's costly, and that it is racially asymmetric in terms of the information about Black people in the marketplace today, the myth of Black inferiority, as well as its other component, racially asymmetric market information available to Black people. Again, that's our third market structure that will exacerbate and perpetuate racism instead of eliminating it, as Gary Becker and those we might call free market fundamentalists suggest. I'm trying to block out there. Pardon me, guys. And then lastly, racially asymmetric transaction costs and societal externalities. Right. So taxes, whether formal or informal, criminal justice penalties, tort. These are all representing transaction costs on top of the activity, either naturally or those imposed by government, right? Pollution, zoning, all of these things determine who is going to, where the incidence of these societal transaction costs will fall. And to the extent they are disproportionately land themselves in black neighborhoods as far as pollution and crime, to the extent taxation is regressive, to the extent it is targeted, as I claim in my latest book, Taxes, Death, and Trouble, to the extent poll taxes are racialized in preventing folks the opportunity to vote. We can describe those as racially asymmetric transaction costs and societal externalities. So it's just a brief explanation on how just about every racially subordinating circumstances can be described in the manner in which it denigrates an otherwise or an idyllic free market, such that intervention is necessary, and the argument that the free market will eliminate racism is incorrect, right? So anyway, towards that end, every week we come at you with 3 pieces of scholarship that have been recently published, and then we can talk about how it fits within that framework. Now, we're doing this a little quicker and a little faster. These couple weeks, I am in the process of editing my book, third book, Afro-Atlantic and Jurisprudence, and so time is of the essence. But we still want to make sure we're up to date week to week to week with the new scholarship that comes out. So our first one that we discovered this week is Zanella, Clow, Rempel, Hamovitch, Hall. Zanella, Clow, Rempel, Hamovitch, and Hall. All of them together are professors at either Ryerson or Ontario Tech. They are Canadian. This paper, it deals with race in Canada. I want to say this is the first paper we've dealt with race in Canada, about the racially asymmetric market in Canada, or describing the extent to which it is or is not. It is the paper is called "The Effects of Race in Criminal History on Landlords' Unwillingness to Rent to Exonerees," not parolees, but exonerees. And this is very interesting because these folks have been determined that they did not, in fact, commit the crime. And you would think that there should be less discrimination against them. But as we here in the United States know, when it comes to the Central Park Five, we have a president, an elected official, that still believes that they're guilty or suffer some punishment, even though all the facts show that they were not, in fact, guilty. So a piece from the paper: when someone is released, let me hide that real quick. When someone is released from prison, obtaining housing is an important component of social reintegration. It's also an important part of protecting the rest of us. This is just my personal commentary. Our study found that landlords similarly discriminate against rightfully and wrongfully convicted individuals in their attempts to secure housing upon release. As rightfully convicted individuals receive assistance obtaining housing upon release, wrongfully convicted individuals should also receive this assistance. I didn't know that they did. But these are important issues. The idea that exonerees are treated seemingly worse than parolees and ex-offenders due to their status, even though the studies show that society does not treat them differently, that society treats them even worse. And to the extent this is a racialized pattern, which the paper does in fact show, again, that is a instance of racially asymmetric transaction costs. We're basically saying that that society, through criminal justice, adds on a cost to the transaction that was the crime, and that cost is asymmetrical between black folks and white folks. We can also show how these categories are mutually constitutive, because the lack of capital or the deprivation of capital that occurs with respect to asymmetrically distributed transaction costs writ large, to the extent they contribute to the racial capital gap, They also do what? They also denigrate or widen racially asymmetric market competition, right? Profit maximization, competition, information, transaction costs. We can also show how this perpetuates or petrifies the myth of black inferiority and therefore racially asymmetric market information. And then the individuals themselves who believe that they can't win, that they can't re-enter society, that they're always going to be quote unquote outside the law, outside society, right? That is an example of racially asymmetric profit maximization in terms of withdrawal, right? So that's how we do this. How we take a paper that's dealing with criminal justice and renting apartments and show how it aggregates and accumulates towards exacerbating and widening the racial wealth gap. So that is Zanella. One more time. Zanella, Clow, Rempel, Hamovitch, and Hall from Ryerson and Ontario Tech. The effects of race and criminal history on landlords' unwillingness to rent exonerees. We have, secondly, Michele Gilmore. Michele E. Gilmore out of University of Baltimore. 5 privacy principles from the GDPR the United States should adopt to advance economic justice. This is in the 52nd volume of the Arizona State Law Journal, page 368, 2020. So let me read a little bit from the piece. We've done a few papers, and I'm very glad that there's been this recent trend dealing with about race and technology, or race and artificial intelligence, right? Always want to refer to back, I wish I would have put it under there, the new Jim Code, right? Oh, let me write that, right? Created right here. The new Jim Code by Rahman Benjamin, right? So if you're interested in the ways in which artificial intelligence and data mining and supercomputers are perpetuating the racial wealth gap, you're going to want to check out the new Jim Code by Rahman Benjamin. But for right now, let's take a piece from Michele E. Gilmore's piece. Algorithmic profiling technologies are impeding the economic security of low-income people in the United States. And of course, black people are disproportionately counted amongst that population. Based on their digital profiles, low-income people are targeted for predatory marketing campaigns and financial products. At the same time, algorithmic decision-making can result in their exclusion from mainstream employment, housing, financial, healthcare, and educational opportunities. So right there, in terms of racially asymmetric market failures, we're talking about racially asymmetric market competition in terms of employment, housing, finance, all that, right? Government agencies are turning to algorithms to apportion social services, yet these algorithms lack transparency, leaving thousands of people adrift without state support and not knowing why. Marginalized communities are also subject to disproportionately high levels of surveillance, including facial recognition technology and the use of predictive policing software. If there was ever a case for wearing masks, maybe this is it. We should use this to our advantage, right? American privacy law is no bulwark against these profiling harms, instead placing the onus of protecting personal data on individuals while leaving government and business largely free to collect, analyze, share, and sell personal data. By contrast, in the European Union, the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, as which mentioned in the title, gives EU residents numerous enforceable rights to control their personal data. Spurred in part by the GDPR, Congress is debating whether to adopt comprehensive privacy legislation in the U.S. This article, and this is an opportunity for interest convergence, right? Privacy is typically not one of those things that is listed within the quote unquote Black or African American agenda. To the extent it is within something that is important to white people or elite white people, there is some opportunity for some interest convergence here. Whether it's enough to make movement, we don't know. We continue. This article contends that the GDPR contains several provisions that have the potential to limit digital discrimination against the poor while enhancing their economic stability and mobility. The GDPR provides the following. 1, the right to an explanation about automated decision-making. Interesting. The right not to be subject to decisions based solely on automated profiling. I need some explanation on that. Number 3, the right to be forgotten. Interesting. The right to be forgotten. 4, opportunities for public participation in data processing programs. And 5, robust implementation and enforcement tools. The interests of low-income people must be part of privacy lawmaking, and the GDPR is a useful template for thinking about how to meet their data privacy needs. Very interesting stuff. Very useful stuff. And it's something that needs to be incorporated in whatever is called a Black agenda. However, as much as I might be hopeful that some privacy concerns would be could converge with the interests of elite white folks, I am also discouraged by the ability of technology to segregate, for artificial intelligence to target, and therefore for remedies to also similarly target those who can afford them, or in the commercial marketplace or in the political marketplace. So great paper. Again, that was Michele E. Gilmore, University of Baltimore Law School, 5 privacy principles from the GDPR the United States should adopt to advance economic justice, in the Arizona State Law Journal 368 this year, 2020. Our last paper that we're dealing with, that we discovered this week, Sabeel, Rahman, and Jocelyn Simons. I want to say Professor Rahman has a paper that we've done maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. So he's got she's got a couple of papers out on the market right now. The Institutional Design of Community Control, in the 108th volume of California Law Review, page 679. A bit from the paper. A growing set of social movements has in recent years revived interest in community control. The idea that local residents should exercise power over services like the police, infrastructure, and schools. These range from a call from the Partnership for Working Families, a grassroots coalition to build community control through the direct democratic governance of local infrastructure, to the push from the movement for Black Lives, or Black Lives Matter movement, a racial justice coalition to institute community control over law enforcement agencies. For these movement reformers, community control grants local communities greater power over both the levers of urban policy making and the direction of local services and resources. This article uses 2 current movement government proposals, community control of the police and community control of local economic development, to develop a broader trans-substantive framework for analyzing how local government institutions might shift power and attempt to address inequality. Now, if we're going to talk about community control, which I think is a wonderful idea, we also have to talk about the structure of that community in terms of effectiveness. And again, when we're talking about a system where there's racially asymmetric market information and a lack with a Black inferiority, as well as a lack of information and racial, social, and educational capital, or there's a dearth or gap, a capital gap in those communities, then won't we also be looking for, won't that also result in consequential gaps, right? The consequences of these community control efforts are dependent upon the capital, and I don't mean financial capital, although that is part of it, right? A public defender is limited by the resources you give them. So if we're talking about community control in a wealthy neighborhood versus community control in a poor neighborhood, how much money is there for investigation? Is there for research? Is there for help, consultancy, those type of things? Also, as far as the individuals themselves, we all have common sense, but then there is something towards having the knowledge, greater, broader extent of knowledge of law, public policy, economics, health, right? All of these things bring to bear upon the community and have to be dealt with in a manner that is intelligent. Now, we know every community has its intelligent people in it. However, we have to ask, what productive activities do they have to put down to be involved in community control. In other words, opportunity costs on those individuals who in those communities is more likely to seek out these opportunities, right? Those who are most productive, those who have the most education, or those that are looking for rents themselves. Again, I am not against this at all. I am just raising questions as far as the economics of producing good community control. All right. So this is the third paper, again, a very worthy paper, Sabeel, Rahman, and Jocelyn Simons, The Institutional Design of Community Control. Very important stuff to talk about and deal with seriously in the 108th volume of the California Law Review, page 679. So those are our three papers for the week. Sabeel, Rahman, and Jocelyn Simons. Michele, Gilmore, 5 Privacy Principles from the GDPR the United States should adopt to advance economic justice. And also Zanella, Clow, Rempel, Hamovitch, and Hall, The Effects of Race and Criminal History on Landlords' Unwillingness to Rent to Exonerees. I would be remiss that I don't address all of my hip hop and the law scholars out there. Happy birthday, happy 47th birthday to hip hop yesterday, August 11th, 1973. Kool Herc pulls his set out to the steps in the South Bronx and sparks a movement that lasts until this day. So for all my hip hop heads, for all my critical race theory heads, and all my law and economics folks, all of us together, let's do this. See you next week on the Economic Justice Law Review Weekly Scholarship Digest.